Today, we're making vegetarian Mapo Tofu, one of our family's favorite dishes, and it's very simple to make. For me, tofu is such a misunderstood ingredient outside of Asia, and I think most high-end restaurants have spent their best effort trying to make this dish as unappealing as possible. So I thought today we'll do it completely from scratch, straight from the packaging itself, so that we can all better understand this alien of an ingredient. So, very simple. For Mapo Tofu, traditionally they use silken tofu. That requires a lot of careful handling to not break them apart. So today, for an easier version, we're going with medium firm. Very simple. With the packaging on, there's the liquid. The tofu comes with a water brine to keep them soft. All you need to do is cut on one side, poke a hole on the other side, and you drain off this liquid. Once that's done, you have your tofu. A common mistake that people make is they think this is ready to go. Yes, tofu is by definition cooked, but because it's been soaked in this liquid to preserve the softness for such a long time, we want to remove the excess liquid to concentrate the flavors and for the tofu to not dilute whatever you're cooking. Now, to do that, there are 3 ways. Well, there are 4 ways, but 3 ways I would enjoy doing. The one I do not enjoy is putting heavy objects on top, trying to drain it, blah, 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 blah. Takes too long, too much effort, too messy. 1, you can put this in the microwave, medium setting, for 2 minutes. This would release most of the liquid. 2, you can put this in the steamer, 10 minutes, same thing. 3, which is what most restaurants do, after you cube them, you can add boiling salted water and soak the tofu. This will also firm up the tofu a tiny bit, making it easier handle for restaurants during service. So today, we cube and steam. Very simple. You find the midpoint and you just run your knife across. And then, we'll go quite big today. I think we go big cubes today. The knife goes down. This is also really satisfying, if you have a sharp knife, that is. Then we cube. That's one done. Once you have your cubes, they go into the steamer. 10 minutes. Now, let's introduce our ingredients. To make Mapo Tofu, we have Sichuan peppercorn. In this case, if you can find red Sichuan peppercorn, they're a bit milder, and because of the short cooking time, that's what you actually want to solve for. The star of the show, Sichuan fermented chili bean paste. Again, you can find this in most Asian supermarkets or online. This is what gives it the distinct Mapo Tofu taste. Optional, vegetarian chili oil, a tiny bit. And to thicken the sauce, cornstarch. We have our aromatic vegetable equivalent, the Chinese Holy Trinity, the garlic, the ginger, the scallion. Now, to replace the minced pork or the minced meat in Mapo Tofu, we have some dry shiitake mushrooms, which I've soaked in warm water for about half an hour. These I bought sliced just because we're going to mince them anyway and it makes the soaking quicker. Now, for this recipe, you can use any dried mushrooms. If you live near an Italian supermarket, buy some dried porcinis. I just wouldn't use anything expensive, so don't use dried wild morels, because why? The reason why we add dry mushrooms are twofold. Number 1, we want it to give us more texture, which the dry mushrooms certainly provide. But 2, while soaking it, we have this wonderful soaking liquid, which is a mushroom dashi that gives us a lot of umami, adding depth of flavor, making up for the lack of meat. And for me, this is actually a tastier version of Mapo Tofu and how I normally like to eat it at home. I rarely add mince nowadays, but if you want the meat version, just substitute this with beef mince, pork mince, up to you. So, to make this our mince, we grab the mushrooms and you squeeze out all the liquid. Once that's done, we set the dashi aside for later and we mince them. They should not show any resistance. If they're still hard, you need to soak them for longer. Dry mushrooms, they develop so much more depth in terms of flavors. And it's a completely different ballgame. This recipe will definitely not work with fresh mushrooms, that's for sure. If you want some extra texture or crunch, and then you have access to wood ear mushroom, throw some of that in as well, but I wouldn't go out of my way to get them. Dry mushroom is a wonderful ingredient for any pantry. Simply adds so much flavor to many things that you cook. Sometimes you don't even detect it, but it's just there. Kind of like Italian salted anchovies, or Japanese dashi, fish dashi, that is. All right, that's good enough for me. Now, let's deal with the Holy Trinity. We grate some ginger. Of course, you remove the skin. That's actually plenty. We chop some garlic. The garlic I wouldn't grate or use a crusher because they burn very easily, unlike the ginger. Perfect. We have the garlic. Now, the scallion. We add this in 2 stages. The white part with the Holy Trinity, Perfect. And the green part as the garnish. Scallion is like a marriage between a shallot and chives. It has everything. If I could only have one garnish for the rest of my life, I think this would be my top choice. Perfect. Now, a bit more than 10 minutes, tofu comes out. And I just want to demonstrate my point. Had we not done this step, this would have been the dilution of flavors of anything you cook. And that's why it could be off-putting to some. So we drain off all of that carefully. This is really hot, by the way, so don't do what I'm doing. Give it a tiny bit of time. And we can cook. First, dry pot, medium heat. Once the pot is relatively hot, we toast some Sichuan peppercorn. It's very important that you use a dry pan for this, by the way. And whatever flavor that's left behind by the peppercorn will cook from it directly, so nothing goes to waste. Now, once the room is fragrant, meaning it smells like a Sichuan restaurant, stove off, pesto mortar. Yes, this is a bit hot. And fine powder. And you're further releasing the essential oil from the skin of the peppercorn. The skin is mostly where the taste comes from. Same with any peppercorn, that is. So you want to do all you can to help the skin release their fragrance. Stove back on. You can still smell the peppercorn. Now, vegetable oil or any high smoke point oil goes in. For me, most restaurants, they add way too much oil when they make mapo tofu, that when you order delivery, you can see even the layer of oil floating to the top. For me, that's completely unnecessary. You don't need that much oil. Now, our mock mince, or the better version of mince, the dry mushrooms, they go in. We're going to further evaporate the water content in the mushroom to concentrate their flavors and to give the dish the contrasting texture that we want. Because there's so much liquid inside still, sometimes they might pop, so just be a bit careful. You can always do it at lower heat if that makes you more comfortable. For me, I want to see some browning, meaning I want them to take on some color. So we're not just sweating them out. Once the evaporation stops, we want to properly brown them to replace the Maillard reaction that we would have if we were using mince. Now, as you can see, there's not much steam coming up anymore, meaning most of the water content has evaporated. We can turn up the heat a tiny bit to brown them. We cooked this for a vegetarian friend of ours when he came over. We just liked it so much that we've been cooking it this way ever since. It's just so wonderful. Now, once you have the desired color, the holy trinity goes in. The grated ginger, minced garlic, minced scallion white. And you want to cook until the scallion is translucent. If some things are sticking to the bottom, don't worry, because we're going to deglaze the pan very shortly. Continuing to build more flavors, we have the Sichuan fermented chili bean paste. I know people don't like me saying to taste when I do recipes, but this really is to taste because this is where the spiciness comes from. And I like a lot of it. And this, you have to cook it out, just like you would if you were making Italian food and using tomato puree, because you want to evaporate the water content and concentrate the flavor a bit more. Beautiful. Now, the optional vegetarian chili oil. Don't sweat if you don't have it. If you do though, make sure you take some from the solid bottom because they're actually the tasty part. Now, we first deglaze with the light soy sauce. Be generous, this is your one seasoning because we're not even using salt here. Now, we deglaze for the second time with this wonderful, wonderful mushroom dashi. We scrape the bottom for any burn bits, any fond, because that's also packed with flavors. Once you're satisfied there's no burn bits left, you bring this back to a boil. Now, we carefully add our tofu. Just because they're still releasing liquid to the bottom, I would actually grab them by hand and put them in gently so that we don't add any unnecessary liquid to dilute the flavors. You can use a spoon if you want. I mean, it's a tofu dish, they're gonna break apart a little bit. It's not a big deal. Now, using a spatula or something soft, we just push and move them around a tiny bit gently. As you can see, immediately they're like sponges. They're absorbing this beautiful liquid, taking on the color already, precisely because we did all we could to squeeze out the liquid that was inside. Lid on, we let it absorb for about 5 minutes. During that time, let's talk cornstarch. The traditional method of thickening is you add water to cornstarch. You mix, 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 and you add almost just before plating. Again, for me, that's unnecessary dilution. Because we're gonna use some dark soy for color anyway, and we also almost always add dark soy at the end. I always like to just mix the two together, and you have a dark soy thickener that's ready to go. Stir until there's absolutely no lump left. Basically, whenever a recipe calls for cornstarch, I always like to mix the cornstarch with one of my cooking liquids, be it a dashi, or dark soy, or light soy. Of course, if I need to add water at the very end, I'd rather do it on its own. But why the unnecessary dilution of flavors if you don't have to? So, already coating the back of the spoon like a perfect sauce. And this is now ready to thicken the mapo tofu. Now, after 5 minutes, oh, this is beautiful, my God. Wow, I mean, what's not to love? Move it around. Now, we add a Sichuan peppercorn in stages. I should have added it when we added the ginger scallion and garlic, but I forgot. So when you do it, make sure you do this in stages, because you add so much more complexity when you do it that way. Mix. Now, we start adding the thickener. Make sure you give it a thorough mix again. And you make it as thick as you like. Bear in mind, when it cools down slightly, the cornstarch would actually thicken a lot more, so make sure you factor that in. You don't want this to become a jelly-like object. Perfect. Round 2, Sichuan peppercorn. Round 2, thickening. Oh, this is perfect texture already. You can see everything clinging on to the tofu like no tomorrow. Look at this. Wow. Just wow. Of course, coats the back of the spoon, so I'm happy. Stove off. Round 3 of Sichuan peppercorn. This is the round that would give you the numbing sensation. So if you don't like it, skip it. And for color and brightness, scallion green. Generous amount of scallion green. And that's it. Contrasting colors, contrasting textures, wonderful, wonderful complexity. One of my favorite dishes. This is Vegetarian Mapo Tofu. I really, really hope you enjoy. Oh, and with any Sichuan food, dry white wine. Don't go red. Greek Assyrtiko, even New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Cheers.